go ahead and get started. Now, I want to look, Ehrman says explicitly some of the things that he implied last time. Look on page 62. If you look at the third paragraph, the one in the middle of the page that starts as we saw, he says, as we saw in the previous chapter, the discrepancies in the Bible are important in part because they force us to take each author seriously. What Mark is saying may not at all be what Luke is saying. Matthew may stand at odds with John, and they both may conflict with what is said in Paul. Look at the last sentence of, or last two sentences of that paragraph, about 5 lines from the bottom of the paragraph. There's a sentence that starts, many of the differences. Many of the differences among the biblical authors have to do with the very heart of their message. Sometimes one author's understanding of a major issue is at odds with another author's on such vital matters as who Jesus is, a very basic thing. Who is Jesus? How salvation is attained, and how the followers of Jesus are to live. Okay, the last chapter, he talked about some relatively minor things, right? Was Jesus born in Nazareth or Bethlehem? Or did Joseph have a house in Bethlehem or not have a house in Bethlehem? Okay, that you could argue that's not central to the message. Something like Jesus saying, you need to follow the law in Matthew seems to be central. And that central message seems to be different from the central message of Paul in Galatians. So he's saying not only are there minor discrepancies or contradictions, there also seem to be a few major discrepancies. Now look at the last sentence on that page. It starts 3 lines from the bottom on 62. It talks about the harmonizing approach. This harmonizing approach to the Bible, which is foundational to much devotional reading, has the advantage of helping readers see the unifying themes of the Bible, but it also has very serious drawbacks. Often, creating unity of thought and belief where originally there was none. The biblical authors did not agree on everything they discussed. Sometimes they had deeply rooted and significant disagreements. Just to summarize what he's been saying here, the historical critical approach requires reading the text individually. Follows it up by saying that harmonizing them can project a unity where there is none. The projecting a unity onto the message of Paul and the message of Matthew may be merely a projection. They may not be unified to begin with. He also he insists, this isn't the word he uses, but he talks about what's basically the same thing. The Bible is an anthology. We talked about this before. You guys have used anthologies for classes like American literature, right? You get those giant books with a selection from Huckleberry Finn, a selection from Moby Dick, and all that stuff in there, right? Those books were not written all to be a part of that anthology. They were written separately, and sometime later somebody grouped them and put them together all in the same book. Now, was Mark Twain and Herman Melville trying to deliver the exact same message? No, not at all, right? Ehrman says it seems to him that Paul and Matthew are not trying to deliver the same message. However, because it's been put together, people try to read a unity there. But in fact, we should look at the Bible as an anthology that pieces together disparate groups of literature. Now, in this chapter, he discusses a couple of specific issues that I want to talk about. I guess there's 4 examples. The first is Jesus' death in Mark and Luke. How is Jesus portrayed, or how is Jesus' death portrayed in Mark first? Yeah? Okay. You'll get back to me, Jen?
In Mark, Jesus was mocked and he was so crucified. And when he was crucified, he said he remained silent. And he didn't ask God why he was doing anything.
Yeah, in Mark, the famous line on the cross is Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" is usually how it's translated. Why have you abandoned me? Now, that seems integral to the message of the Gospel of Mark. How? How might that be connected to the message of the Gospel of Mark as a whole? There's a little hint. What can Jesus' followers expect according to the Gospel of Mark?
Suffering.
Right. They can expect suffering just like Jesus did. Right? The Gospel of Mark tells Jesus' followers, look, Jesus was abandoned and you're going to feel like you were abandoned, right? It's okay because the last will be first when the kingdom of God comes. But in the meantime, you can just expect to be beaten and downtrodden, etc. How is Jesus' death portrayed in Luke? What is Jesus like in Luke? Selena?
He's more, he's not really as in shock as he is in Mark. He's more concerned with other people than his own destiny. He says, like, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing.
Yeah, he's really stoic, right? He's like, all right, I guess I'm going to die. That's okay. I can handle it. And he's more concerned about the people around him. He says, man, these suckers who are crucifying me, God, I hope that you'll forgive them. Like, that's completely different than, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Isn't that kind of confusing? Because didn't he know that he was kind of headed towards that in Mark? He was, he knew that he was going to be suffering, and he knew that he was that was going to happen to him.
Yeah, but presumably it was so terrible and so painful that it's still if I tell you that I'm going to kill you, and you expect me to kill you, when I come around to doing it, you'll still probably scream. I assume it's that sort of thing, that it's so terrible that of course he's going to cry out, even if he knows. That's the only sense I can make of it. Did you have a hand, Jen? No. Is there a way to reconcile this difference between the Jesus who's like, why have you abandoned me, and a Jesus who's like, God, I hope that you'll forgive them for doing this terrible thing to me?
I don't know if it was in here or somewhere else, but didn't they say that he felt both things at the same time?
Some people have said that,
Yeah.
which on the surface doesn't seem to make much sense. What other ways might you reconcile it? Yeah, well, if you look at this and you're like, it looks like a contradiction, but let me explain how it's really not. How could you explain it?